Between Two Cowboys, Book 1 of the Untamed Territory series by Lisa Winters.
Chapter 1. The wire bit into the leather of his gloves as Ethan stretched it taut, the metal groaning in protest. Every staple he hammered into the weathered fence post was just another small stand against the slow, creeping rock. The post leaned, the wood bleached bone gray by 100 Montana seasons, and the whole damn line sagged down the length of the west pasture. Just like everything else on the Bar C, it was given up. He wiped the forearm across his brow, smearing a mix of sweat and grime. From this rise, he could see most of the spread. The ranch house, a sturdy two-story his great-grandfather had built with his own hands, looked solid from a distance, but he knew the porch steps were soft and a leak had stained the ceiling in his father's old office. The big red barn, the heart of the operation, listed almost imperceptibly to the north. 5 generations of Colts had poured their blood and hope into this soil. He was about to be the one who lost it all. A glint of sun on chrome caught his eye. A car, not a truck, was making its way up the long dirt drive, stirring a plume of dust that settled on the thirsty grass. It was too clean, too city-slick. His gut tightened. He knew that Lexus. He hammered one last staple with a final, vicious crack, the sound swallowed by the vast, empty sky. Mr. Abernathy from First Montana Bank didn't even bother to get dust on his polished Italian loafers. He leaned against the grill of his car, a slim leather briefcase clutched in one hand, his face a mask of professional regret. "Ethan," he said, his voice as smooth and sterile as his office. Ethan just nodded, pulling off his gloves and stuffing them into the back pocket of his worn jeans. He didn't offer a handshake. His own hands were calloused and dirty, an inventory of the work he'd done. He had a feeling Abernathy's were clammy. "Abernathy, you're a long way from Harmony Gulch." "Thought it was better to deliver this in person," Abernathy said, his gaze flicking toward the sagging fence line as if it proved his point. He opened his briefcase with 2 precise clicks that echoed in the quiet. He pulled out a thick envelope. "We've been over the numbers, Ethan. The extensions, the grace periods. The board can't justify it any longer." Ethan's throat was dry. He'd known this was coming, had felt it like a change in the weather, but seeing it manifest in Abernathy's manicured hand made it real. It felt like a eulogy. "The resort developer, Thorne, he's putting the pressure on," Abernathy continued, his tone softening into something meant to pass for sympathy. "He's made it clear that acquiring this parcel is a key part of his plan. Our hands are tied." Clay Thorne. The name was acid on Ethan's tongue. Their family had been circling the Bar C for generations, a pack of slick coyotes, waiting for the old bull to weaken. "So you're selling my family's legacy to a man who wants to turn it into a golf course for millionaires." "It's not a sale. It's a foreclosure," Abernathy corrected, extending the envelope. "You have 120 days to satisfy the full outstanding balance. After that, the property will be seized and put to auction." Ethan took the envelope. The paper felt heavy, official. It felt like a tombstone. 4 months. An impossible, insulting timeline. Abernathy knew it. Thorne knew it. It was a death sentence delivered with a regretful smile. "I'm sorry, Ethan." "Truly," Abernathy said, already retreating to his car. Ethan didn't watch him leave. He looked down at his own hands, at the calluses his father and his father's father had worn in the exact same places. These were the hands that were supposed to hold the ranch together. The weight in his hand was immense, but the weight in his chest was heavier. He was 34 years old, and he was already a ghost on his own land.
Cody Colt wheeled his gleaming Ford F-250 up the rutted drive, the bass from the speakers thumping a rhythm that was pure Nashville. He'd had the truck detailed in Bozeman, and the black paint shone like polished obsidian, a stark contrast to the faded, thirsty world around it. He killed the engine, and the sudden silence was jarring, filled only by the whisper of the wind through the pines. Home. The word was dust and disappointment. He swung out of the cab, his brand-new Ariat boots landing softly. He adjusted the crisp brim of his hat, his silver championship belt buckle, his latest win from Cheyenne glinting in the sun. He looked good. He always made sure he looked good. It was armor. The place, on the other hand, looked like hell. The porch sagged. The paint on the barn was peeling away in long strips like sunburnt skin. The whole damn ranch seemed to be slowly surrendering, piece by weathered piece. A familiar ache, one he'd been out running for 10 years on the rodeo circuit, settled deep in his gut. He'd run from this slow surrender, from the sheer, bone-wearying monotony of trying to hold back the seasons with nothing but sweat. Ethan was by the west fence, his back to the house, a solitary figure against the endless landscape. Even from 100 yards, Cody could read the tension in his brother's shoulders, the permanent, weary slump of a man carrying too much weight alone. "Figured I'd find you out here, trying to wrestle the world into place with nothing but your bare hands," Cody called out, his voice looser and louder than he felt. Ethan turned slowly. His face was a study in exhaustion, his hazel eyes shadowed and wary. He didn't smile. "Cody, what are you doing here? Get tired of chasing buckle bunnies in arena dust?" The barb was expected, but it still stung. "Charm's still intact, I see." Cody shot back, sauntering closer. "Thought I'd come see if the old homestead was still standing. Looks like it's a close call." "It's standing," Ethan said, his voice flat. He held up a thick envelope. "For now." Cody's easy smile faltered. He recognized the letterhead from the bank. That wasn't a friendly Christmas card. "What's that?" For a long moment, Ethan just stared at him, a decade of resentment passing between them. Cody could feel the old dynamic snapping back into place. Ethan the responsible, Cody the reckless. But something in his brother's gaze was different. It wasn't just anger. It was desperation. "Pride's a funny thing, ain't it?" Ethan said, his voice rough. "Makes you pretend you can hold up a mountain by yourself, even when your knees are buckling." He shoved the envelope into Cody's hand. "You're a Colt. You deserve to know how deep the hole is." Cody's fingers felt numb as he opened the flap. He scanned the dense text. Foreclosure. Seizure. Auction. His eyes snagged on a number that made his stomach clench. $75,000. It was just a number on a page, but it felt like a brand on his skin. His rodeo winnings, which had seemed like a king's ransom on the road, suddenly felt like pocket change. Guilt, hot and sharp, pierced through his swagger. "Man, Ethan," he whispered, the paper trembling in his hand. "How? How did it get this bad?" "A little bit at a time, then all at once," Ethan said, turning his gaze back to the failing ranch. "You weren't here, Cody. You were off chasing glory. I was here. I was here for the blizzards, the drought, and the day we buried Dad. I was here for all of it." He had run. It had been easier to be the hero for 8 seconds in an arena than for a lifetime on the land. "I can help," Cody said, the words coming out fast, desperate. "I just won big in Cheyenne. I can wire it. It's not all of it, but it's a start." Ethan let out a short, bitter laugh. "And what happens next month? Your prize money ain't gonna fix this, little brother. This needs more than a lucky ride." "And then what are you gonna do?" Cody demanded. "Just let him take it? Let Clay Thorne pave over Dad's grave for a damn swimming pool?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted, and the admission seemed to cost him everything. He looked smaller, older, broken. "But I'm not gonna do it alone anymore." The sound of another engine made them both turn. A sensible, clean but not fancy SUV was pulling to a stop behind Cody's truck. A woman stepped out, and she looked like she belonged in that car. She was dressed in crisp, dark-washed jeans, a tailored button-down shirt, and practical-looking boots. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and she wore glasses that gave her an air of sharp intelligence. She held a portfolio case in one hand, moving with a purpose that felt utterly alien to the slow, crumbling decay of the bar seat. She stopped a respectful distance away, her stormy gray eyes assessing them both. "Ethan Colt?" she asked, her voice clear and professional. It cut through the thick, emotional air between the brothers like a knife. "I'm Sierra Vance. I believe you were expecting me."
The inefficiency was the first thing that struck her. It was a physical assault on her senses. Pulling up the drive, Sierra's mind was already cataloging the liabilities. Sagging fence lines, a listing barn, a ranch house that, while possessing a certain rustic grandeur, looked like a money pit. The place wasn't just failing, it was a case study in deferred maintenance. Still, the land itself was magnificent. It rolled in vast, sweeping gestures, a river cutting a silver ribbon through the valley floor. The raw materials were here. Good grazing land, ample water rights, and a 5-generation legacy. Legacy was a powerful marketing tool, but it didn't pay the bills. She found them by the fence, a scene of raw, masculine tension. The Colt brothers. She'd studied their files, but seeing them in the flesh was illuminating. The air between them crackled, an official-looking envelope clutched in the younger brother's hand. Financial trouble. Severe. This was not an optimal starting position. She kept her distance, analyzing the variables. The older one, Ethan, was the ranch itself, weathered, burdened, and rooted to the spot. He carried his responsibility like a physical weight, a man loyal to a fault and resistant to change. The younger, Cody, was coiled energy and restless charm, dressed in expensive Western wear that was more show than work. A risk-taker, easily bored, running from something. They were a volatile, unpredictable equation, and she was here to solve them. "I'm Sierra Vance," she announced, her voice level, cutting through their drama. "I believe you were expecting me." Ethan's gaze was heavy, skeptical. He gave a curt nod. "The new manager." He said the title like a foreign word he wasn't sure how to pronounce. Cody's posture shifted instantly, tension replaced by a slow, appreciative smile. "Well now, Ethan, you didn't tell me our new manager was going to be so easy on the eyes." Sierra met his gaze without flinching, a small, cool smile touching her lips. "And you must be Cody. Your brother failed to mention you'd be here. Does your presence factor into the ranch's current operational budget?" Cody's smile widened, a flicker of genuine surprise in his eyes. He chuckled. "Ouch. All business, huh?" "That's what your brother is paying me for, Mr. Colt," she said, turning her attention to Ethan, dismissing the flirtation. "And given the visible state of the ranch, I'd say we have a great deal of business to discuss." She held up her portfolio. "I've reviewed the financials you sent. They're dire, but not unsalvageable. I've prepared an initial 3-phase turnaround strategy. Shall we head to the office?" She stood her ground, a small island of crisp urban competence in their sea of dusty, rural drama. The scent of pine, horse, and dry earth was thick in the air, a world away from the sterile analytics of her past life in Denver, a past she had to keep buried. Ethan stared at her, his expression unreadable. Cody watched them both, his easy charm replaced by a sharp curiosity. For Sierra, this wasn't just another job. This was her last stand. A place to disappear and rebuild. But as she looked at the two rival brothers, the weight of their history hanging between them like a live wire, she had a sinking feeling that disappearing wasn't going to be an option. This was going to be complicated.
Chapter 2.
The office was less a room and more a monument to decay. The inefficiency of it was a physical assault on Sierra's senses. It wasn't just cluttered. It was a hostile environment for logic. A thick layer of dust coated every surface, smelling of old paper, stale coffee, and quiet desperation. Spindles of paid and unpaid bills leaned like tiny, weary towers on a heavy oak desk, threatening to collapse under the weight of their own neglect. A calendar on the wall was still turned to a month from 2 years ago, a cheerful picture of spring branding for a season long since dead and gone. This wasn't just chaos. This was entropy, and the sheer waste of it grated on her nerves like a grinding gear. Ethan Colt stood stiffly by the window, his arms crossed over his broad chest, his posture a fortress of defensiveness. He belonged to this room, a man worn down by the same slow erosion. Cody, by contrast, leaned against the doorframe, all lazy charm and simmering energy, observing the scene with the detached amusement of a tourist at a museum of failure. "Let's start with the books," Sierra said, setting her portfolio on the only clear corner of the desk. She opened her laptop, the quiet hum of its fan, an alien sound of modern efficiency in the room's oppressive silence. "I need access to all accounts payable and receivable, supplier contracts, herd health records, and payroll for the last 5 years." Ethan's jaw tightened, a muscle feathering along the hard line. "Silas and the boys are paid in cash most weeks. The rest of it, it's in there somewhere." He gestured vaguely at the mountain of paper, an admission of defeat that clearly galled him. "I'll find it," Sierra said, her tone leaving no room for argument. This was her territory. In this chaos, she was the apex predator. "But I need to see the land to understand the operational assets, the pastures, the water sources, the herd itself." A flicker of something, maybe respect, maybe just surprise at her directness, passed through Ethan's guarded eyes. He gave a curt nod. "Fine. Let's go." Outside, the Montana air was clean and sharp, a welcome antidote to the office's stale breath. Ethan led the way toward a battered ranch truck, its fenders dented, and its paint faded to the color of a stormy sky. But Cody intercepted them, gesturing with a theatrical sweep of his arm toward his own gleaming F-250. "No sense in all of us rattling our teeth out in that old rust bucket," he said, the wink he aimed at Sierra a bright flash of practiced charm. "My truck's got heated leather seats. The Bar C truck has hauled more feed than your truck has seen car washes," Ethan grumbled, but he didn't protest when Sierra, prioritizing practicality over pride, headed for the newer vehicle. She took the passenger seat, leaving the brothers to sort out the middle. Cody won, sliding in beside her with a grin, smelling of expensive cologne, and a confidence that felt manufactured for the occasion. Ethan crammed himself in on the other side, his big frame radiating a silent, resentful heat. As they bumped along a rutted dirt track, Sierra had her tablet out, her mind already mapping the ranch's broken pieces. "What's your current pasture rotation schedule?" Ethan grunted from the driver's seat. "We move when the grass gets low." "Do you section the pastures to allow for regrowth? Monitor for invasive weeds?" she pressed, her tone clinical. "This ain't some fancy California vineyard, Ms. Vance. It's a ranch." "A ranch is a business, Mr. Colt. And right now, yours is a failing one." The words were blunt, a necessary scalpel to cut through his stubborn pride. Beside her, Cody shifted, a silent, amused observer to the tense volley. She pointed to a line of distant bluffs, her mind already cross-referencing the view with the survey maps in her file. "The maps show the river runs along your eastern boundary for nearly 3 miles. Those are prime riparian water rights. Are you leveraging them?" "We water the cattle there in the summer," Ethan said, his voice clipped. "You could be leasing access to downstream users or developing a small-scale irrigation system for a dedicated hay crop, cutting your winter feed costs by half," she countered, the possibilities assembling themselves in her head with the satisfying click of puzzle pieces. "Your operational costs are bloated because you're not capitalizing on your most valuable assets." Cody whistled softly. "Hear that, big brother? She's got it all figured out." He turned to her, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "So what's a pretty city girl like you know about cutting hay anyway?" Sierra didn't look up from her tablet. "More than you know about balancing a budget, I'd wager. And I'd thank you to stop calling me a city girl. I have a master's in agricultural business management from Colorado State. My looks are irrelevant to my ability to do my job." The silence that followed was thick and satisfying. Cody let out a short, surprised laugh, a sound of genuine appreciation. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Ethan's reflection in the side window. He almost smiled. It was the faintest upward twitch of his lips, there and gone. But she saw it, a tiny crack in the fortress. They spent the next 2 hours driving the property line. She was relentless, her questions sharp and incisive. She asked about the genetics of their Black Angus bull, the calving mortality rate. With every grudging answer from Ethan, Sierra saw a clearer picture of the problem. It wasn't one thing. It was 100 small things, a slow cascade of neglect, born from grief, exhaustion, and a deep-seated resistance to change. But the potential, it was enormous. The land was rich, the water rights were solid, and the Colt name, despite the debt, still meant something in this valley. This place wasn't a lost cause, it was a puzzle. A complex, infuriating, and deeply compelling puzzle. And as she glanced at the 2 brothers beside her, one as immovable as the mountains, the other as restless as the wind, she knew they were the most complicated pieces of all.
He felt like a bug under a microscope, pinned and dissected by her cool gray eyes. Every question Sierra asked was an indictment of his management, a spotlight on every corner he'd cut, every problem he'd let slide because he was too tired or too broke to fix it properly. When they drove past the north pasture, the section of fence patched with frayed orange baling twine stood out like a fresh wound. Shame, hot and unwelcome, crawled up his neck. He'd meant to fix that last fall, before the first snow. Cody, for his part, wasn't helping. He kept trying to charm her, leaning across the cab to point out where they used to fish as kids or where their dad had taught them to ride. He was treating this like a trip down memory lane, not a desperate mission to save their home. Every time Sierra shut him down with cool, detached professionalism, Ethan felt a grim sort of satisfaction. Cody's charm was useless here. The problems on the bar seat were too real, too big to be smiled away. Back in the office, the tension shifted. It was quieter, more focused. Sierra sat at the desk, a small island of order in the hurricane of clutter. She'd rolled up the sleeves of her crisp shirt, and with her hair pulled back and glasses perched on her nose, she attacked the paper mountain with a methodical ferocity that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. She sorted, she scanned, she entered figures into a spreadsheet on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Ethan and Cody stood by, 2 big, useless statues. For the first time in years, someone else was in charge of the ranch's fate, and he didn't know if it felt like a relief or a surrender. After an hour of intense silence, Sierra leaned back in the creaking chair and pushed her glasses up her nose. "Found one of the leaks," she said, her gaze fixed on the screen. "Your cattle feed supplement. You're still on the contract your father signed with Western Stockman Supply 12 years ago," Ethan frowned. "It's a good price. Dad locked it in." "It was a good price. In 2013, she corrected. "But commodity prices for grain have dropped twice since then. Your competitors' rates are almost 30% lower. You're effectively throwing away $6,000 a year." Ethan stared at her. $6,000. It was a fortune. It was a drop in the bucket. It was a failure. His failure for not checking. He'd been so focused on the big fires, the bank loans, and the vet bills that he'd let himself be consumed by the smoke from the small ones. Furthermore, she continued, turning a page in a dusty ledger, the property taxes on the unused rodeo grounds are astronomical for a non-performing asset. You're paying for a liability. This time it was Cody who spoke up, his voice defensive. We could get that running again, host some small-town events. That's income. Sierra finally looked at them, her eyes sharp and penetrating. It would require an initial investment of at least $20,000 in structural repairs and insurance to get it up to code. Money you don't have. Right now, it's a hole you're pouring cash into. She turned her attention back to Ethan. We can petition the county to reclassify it as agricultural grazing land. It would save you another $3,000 a year in taxes. Ethan could only nod, his throat thick. She was right. About all of it. He'd been drowning for so long he'd forgotten which way was up, and she'd walked in and calmly pointed toward the surface. The hope that bloomed in his chest was a painful, unfamiliar sensation. He watched her turn back to the screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. He noticed the determined set of her jaw, the way a single strand of dark hair had escaped her ponytail to curl against her neck. For a split second, the thought wasn't about the ranch or the debt. It was just her. He shoved the feeling down, deep and fast. She wasn't a woman. She was a tool. A last-ditch hired gun. He couldn't afford for her to be anything else.
Cody felt like he was shrinking. In the rodeo arena, he was a giant. The roar of the crowd, the explosive power of the bull beneath him, the winner's check in his hand, it all made him feel larger than life. Here, in this dusty office, watching Sierra Vance dissect their family's failure with the precision of a surgeon, he felt small, irrelevant. He tried to flirt, his go-to defense mechanism, and she'd swatted it away like a fly. He tried to offer a solution, the rodeo grounds, and she dismantled it with cold, hard numbers. He was used to being the solution, the one who could ride in with a flashy win and make things better for a little while. But this problem wasn't about a single glorious moment. It was about the slow, grinding work of every day. And that was Ethan's territory. Now, it was Sierra's too. He watched his brother and Sierra hunch over the desk, speaking their own language of profit margins and amortization. Ethan, who usually bristled at any suggestion, was listening to her. Actually listening. He saw the grudging respect in his brother's eyes, the way he absorbed her words. A new, unfamiliar jealousy twisted in Cody's gut. It wasn't just that Ethan was getting her attention. It was that they had a purpose together. They were a team. And he was just the guy with the checkbook. He finally muttered something about needing some air and slipped out, his boots crunching on the gravel. The sun was getting low, painting the undersides of the clouds in shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful, lonely sight. His gaze snagged on the familiar skeleton of the practice arena. He turned toward it without thinking, the gate groaning a complaint as he shoved it open. A lone silhouette stood near the far fence, head bowed to the sparse grass. Buckshot. The old horse lifted his head at the sound of the gate, his ears pricked forward in a silent greeting. The silence here was absolute as he rested his forehead against the horse's warm neck, the familiar scent of dust and animal. "Hey, old man," he murmured, his voice rough against the quiet. He stroked the coarse mane, his fingers tracing patterns he didn't see. All his wins, all the glory, it was just noise. A distraction. It couldn't fix the broken numbers on a ledger sheet. He stood there, leaning against the solid weight of his oldest friend, and watched the sky bleed from orange to the deep indigo of night. The cool air finally sank into his bones, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. He gave Buckshot one last, firm pat on the neck. He walked toward the old bunkhouse, a small, rustic cabin set 100 yards from the main house. It was clean enough, but it felt temporary. Everything in his life felt temporary. He walked with his hands shoved in his pockets, the championship buckle feeling more like a weight than a prize. As he approached, he saw a light on in Sierra's window. She must have taken a break from the ledgers. He saw her silhouette through the thin curtains. She was on her phone, her back to the window, her posture rigid with tension. She paced the small room like a caged animal. He couldn't hear her words, but he could feel the frantic energy from here. This wasn't the calm, controlled professional from the office. This was someone scared. He slowed his steps, feeling like an intruder. Just as he was about to turn away, she stopped pacing, and her shoulders slumped. He waited a beat before continuing on his path, making his footsteps deliberately heavy on the porch steps. The light inside her room suddenly went out. A moment later, her own door opened. She stood there, half hidden in the shadows, her face pale. "Can I help you, Mr. Colt?" she asked, her voice once again perfectly composed, but he could see the strain around her eyes. "Just head inside for the night," he said, trying to sound casual. Long day. Yes, it was. She was about to close the door when the phone in her hand buzzed, the screen flaring to life in the dim porch light. His eyes were drawn to the sudden glow. In the split second before she could flip it over, he saw the stark white banner of the text notification at the top of the screen. From R. Mason. You can't hide forever. She saw him see it. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flash of pure panic before a shutter slammed down. Her expression became impenetrable, her body language closing off completely. I have a lot of work to do. Good night, she said, and closed the door with a quiet, definitive click. Cody stood on the porch, the cool night air raising goosebumps on his arms. The ranch had its secrets: debt, resentment, failure. But Sierra, the woman who was here to save them, had secrets of her own. For the first time all day, Cody felt like he had a purpose. He was going to find out what they were.
Chapter 3.
The knock on his bunkhouse door was a sharp, military-style rapping that felt less like a summons and more like an attack. Cody cracked an eye open, his head thick with a sleep that had been hard-won and shallow. The rodeo circuit had conditioned him for late nights and lazy mornings, not this pre-dawn reveille. 5:30, Mr. Colt. Sierra Vance's voice cut through the door, as crisp and unforgiving as the chill in the air. Your task list is on the door. Coffee's in the main house. Wheels up at 6. Cody groaned and pulled the pillow over his head. Wheels up? Who the hell did she think she was? He was a rodeo champion. The prodigal son here to be the charismatic savior, not a grunt getting his hands dirty before the sun was even a rumor in the sky. But the memory of the foreclosure notice, of the raw despair he'd seen in Ethan's eyes, was a cold stone in his gut. He swung his legs out of bed, the floorboards icy beneath his bare feet. Taped to the door was a single sheet from a legal pad, her handwriting a series of sharp, efficient marks. At the top, it read, See Colt, Daily Objectives. 1. Clear brush and check integrity of north fence line, sections 4 to 7. 2. Muck out and rebed stalls 3 and 5 in the main barn. Long-term neglect, potential for hoof rot. 3. Assist S with inventory of feed supplements. He stared at the second item, mucking out stalls. He hadn't done that since he was 16, a chore he'd always considered the lowest form of labor. He was the one who rode the lightning, not the one who shoveled its manure. He crumpled the paper in his fist, a hot flare of resentment burning through the morning chill. This wasn't a job. It was a message. He found the other ranch hands by the barn, sipping coffee in the gray light, their faces etched with the permanent skepticism of men who had seen it all. They watched him approach, their eyes lingering on his clean, expensive jeans. An outsider, just a different kind. Mornin', champ, Silas grunted, stroking his long gray mustache. The nickname dripped with irony. The boss lady got you on the shovel squad today? Cody forced a grin. Just keeping my muscles toned for the arena, Silas. He grabbed a pitchfork that felt foreign and insulting in his hands, and stalked toward stall number 3. The stench hit him first, a damp, ammonia-laced odor that spoke of seasons of neglect. This wasn't work. This was penance. For the next hour, he stabbed and lifted, falling into a grim, rhythmic cadence. He could see Ethan across the yard, methodically dismantling a well pump, his movements economical and sure. There was no wasted energy in his brother, no theatrics. Just the work. Hard, grinding, endless work. An old, familiar shame twisted inside Cody. He'd run from this, from the sheer, bone-wearying monotony of it. And Ethan had stayed, enduring it, letting it carve the lines of exhaustion into his face. He finished the first stall, his back aching and his hands blistering inside his soft leather gloves. He leaned on the pitchfork and watched Sierra stride across the yard, tablet in hand, imposing her will on a place that had only ever answered to the seasons and to his father. She looked up, and their eyes met. She gave him a short, sharp nod. Not praise, not criticism, just acknowledgement. Task in progress. He was an asset to be managed. Fine, if he was going to be a grunt, he'd be the best damn grunt she'd ever seen. He gritted his teeth, straightened his aching back, and marched toward stall number 5.
Control was the currency of her new life. Without it, she was bankrupt. The Bar C wasn't just financially chaotic, it was operationally adrift. The men worked on instinct and tradition, not a plan. They reacted. Her job was to make them anticipate. She had Ethan on the water pump because a simple, preventative repair now could save them thousands down the line. It was a tangible problem with a logical solution. Ethan, for all his resistance to her city methods, understood the mechanics of his ranch. He respected the logic, even if he resented that it came from her. Cody was a different challenge. He was pure, kinetic energy. The menial labor wasn't punishment, it was strategy. She needed him grounded, invested in the soil of the place. She needed him to feel the weight of every broken board. And if she was being honest, She needed him too busy to get under her skin with that lazy, knowing smile. Her biggest hurdle was Silas, the repository of the ranch's history, who viewed her as a temporary infection. "Ma'am," he'd said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "That creek pasture gets boggy this time of year. Old man Colt never put the yearlings there, till June. The ground is dry enough now, Silas," she'd replied, pointing to the data on her tablet. "The soil moisture readings are well within acceptable parameters. Moving them now gives us 3 extra weeks of prime grazing. We don't have the luxury of inefficiency." He had stared at her tablet as if it were a venomous snake. "Ranchin' ain't about what a machine tells you. It's about a feel for the land." "The machine helps me quantify the feeling," she'd said. He had grumbled, but he'd led the men toward the creek pasture. A small victory. Beneath the hum of professional focus, however, a tremor of anxiety vibrated. "R. Mason. You can't hide forever." The email was a cold reminder that her new life was built on a foundation of sand. The memory of her ex-fiancé, Rory, looking at her with feigned sympathy while his lawyers dismantled her life, made it hard to breathe. She shook it off, focusing on the problem in front of her. The sky. To the west, the clouds were piling up, their bellies a bruised, ugly shade of gray. The air grew thick and heavy. It felt like the storm brewing back in Denver, the one she could never quite outrun. "Silas," she called out, her voice sharp with sudden urgency. "Radio Ethan. Tell him to get that pump finished. And find out where Cody is. That storm is coming in fast. We need to check the herd in the upper west pasture. That fence line. The one patched, with baling twine." Just as Silas keyed his radio, a crack of thunder so violent it felt like the sky itself was splitting shook the ground. A moment later, Pete's frantic voice crackled from the radio. "We got a problem!" The thunder spooked the heifers. A dozen of them broke through the old fence by the ravine and are headed for the scrub. The carefully constructed flowchart of her morning shattered into 1,000 disastrous possibilities. The ravine. This wasn't a question of efficiency anymore. This was a crisis.
The first fat drops of rain fell as Pete's call came over the radio. "Shit!" he growled, the wrench slipping from his grasp. It disappeared into the mud with a sick thud. He'd known that fence was a weak point, another task deferred for a more urgent problem. Now it was going to cost him. He was on his horse, Anchor, in under a minute. He saw Cody sprinting from the barn, his swagger gone, replaced by a focused intensity Ethan hadn't seen in years. Sierra was right behind him, her face pale but her jaw set. "I'll take the truck down the access road and try to head them off from below," she yelled over the rising wind. "You two go in from above. Keep them out of the ravine." Ethan just nodded, a surge of respect cutting through the panic. Her mind was a weapon. He spurred Anchor into a gallop, Cody close behind. The rain came down in a driving, blinding sheet. They found the breach easily, a 20-foot section of rotted posts and rusted wire flattened as if by a giant hand. The tracks led straight toward the ravine. "Damn it!" Ethan yelled into the wind. They pushed their horses hard and broke through a stand of dripping pines to see them. The heifers were huddled on a wide ledge, their eyes white with terror, the ground crumbling away just feet from where they stood. Below them, the ravine fell into a churning, muddy torrent. "Easy now," Ethan murmured to Cody. "Can't spook 'em again." But it was too late. A bolt of lightning forked across the sky, followed by a deafening crack of thunder. One of the heifers bolted, scrambling along the narrowest part of the ledge. It ended up trapped, a sheer rock wall on one side, 100-foot drop on the other. His heart seized. He looked over at Sierra, who had made it to the opposite side on foot. Rain plastered her dark hair to her face, her shirt soaked and muddy. But her eyes were sharp, analytical. She wasn't panicking. She was trying to solve the problem. The admiration he felt was so strong it caught him off guard. "I'm going in," he said to Cody, swinging off Anchor. "Hold up," Cody said, his voice tight. He uncoiled the lariat from his saddle horn. "The ground's too loose. But I might have one shot." Ethan watched as Cody dismounted, his movements practiced and certain. The high-dollar rodeo star was gone. This was just Cody Colt, the kid who'd been born with a rope in his hand. He climbed onto a broad, slick boulder that gave him a better angle, his footing treacherous. He shook out a loop, his wrist rotating in that deceptively simple motion. He waited, poised. The heifer shifted, its back hooves slipping. It was now or never. Cody's arm blurred. The rope shot out through the curtain of rain. He'd thrown a hula hand loop, a difficult, fast-moving cast. The loop turned over perfectly, seeming to defy the wind, and dropped neatly over the heifer's head. A throw of impossible grace. 1 in 1,000. The heifer bellowed, but Cody was already digging in his heels, wrapping the rope around the base of the boulder, taking the strain. He held the animal fast, his knuckles white, his muscles straining under his soaked shirt. "Now, Ethan," he yelled, "get the others turned around. I've got this one." It broke the spell. Ethan moved, yelling commands. Working together, they managed to push the rest of the herd back to safety. When it was over, they stood in the receding rain, soaked, muddy, and bone-tired. The barn was an island of quiet in the storm's aftermath, smelling of wet horses and steam from hot coffee. Sierra leaned against a stall door, her professional mask washed away. She looked exhausted, but as she looked at the brothers, a flicker of something new was in her eyes. Respect. Ethan took a sip of the scalding coffee. He looked at Cody, who was wringing out his ruined leather gloves, his face streaked with mud. He looked less like a rodeo star and more like the brother he remembered. "That was one hell of a throw," Ethan said, his voice quiet but clear. Cody looked up, surprised. A small, tired, genuine smile touched his lips. "Just doing my part." He glanced at Sierra, a silent question in his eyes. She raised her mug to him, a small, almost imperceptible gesture that felt monumental. "Your skills are a quantifiable asset, Cody Colt," she said, and this time, the hint of a real smile touched her lips. "I'll be sure to factor them into my projections." Ethan watched them. The quiet exchange, the fragile truce brokered by mud and rain. The weight on his shoulders felt, for the first time in a long time, just a little bit lighter. It wasn't pride, and it wasn't surrender. It felt like the beginning of a partnership.
Hey, this is Lisa. Thanks for listening to the first 3 chapters of my Untamed Territory series. To find out what happens next, click the link in the description to read the full book on Amazon.